Welcome to the Deep Dive. We've got a really fascinating mix of material today, thanks to our listeners. Everything from, Plato's Cave right through to Mahamudra and Rigpa, plus some interesting takes on brain function and consciousness.
It's quite a spread, definitely. Lots to unpack there.
For sure. So
Yeah.
our mission really is to sift through all this and pull out the key insights. What can these different sources tell us about, well, the mind, how we see reality, maybe even how to free ourselves from suffering?
That's the core of it, looking at those connections.
Yeah. We'll be touching on some big themes. This
Yeah.
idea of the self being an illusion, the role of awareness, mindfulness, how the brain works during sleep, thoughts, emotions.
And those paths to liberation, like the four conditions and the Mahamudra yogas mentioned in the sources.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. This concept of the illusion of self, where do we start with that?
It's a really fundamental point in several of these texts. The basic idea is, well, if something is made of parts, it doesn't really have its own independent existence.
Like the car example.
Exactly. Or a person. No single bit is the whole thing. It's the collection, the arrangement. This challenges our usual feeling of a solid, unchanging me.
Right, and that connects directly to the Buddhist idea of no self, doesn't it? The sources seem to hint this feeling of I is maybe something the brain constructs.
Possibly, yeah. Maybe even as a sort of survival tool, linked to competition, perhaps. It's an interesting angle.
It does sound a bit like Plato's Cave.
Yeah.
Or even The Matrix,
Yeah.
mistaking these fleeting thoughts or feelings for the real deal.
That's a good parallel. This state of, let's call it ignorance or unawareness, versus the potential for deeper awareness that something like the Dharma talks about.
So if this I feeling is so deep-seated, maybe even for survival, how does something like mindfulness even begin to tackle that?
Well, that's where the idea of bare attention comes in. Mindfulness, as it's described here, is about directing this very simple, non-judgmental attention towards our thoughts as they arise.
Just watching them.
Essentially, yes. And there's this principle. Two thoughts can't really exist at the exact same moment. So, bringing mindful attention to a thought, sort of, displaces the usual mental chatter, that twilight state.
Okay, and here's something I found really counterintuitive but interesting. Instead of fighting thoughts, which, let's be honest, usually makes them stronger,
Right, yes, suppression often backfires.
the material suggests actually facing them, observing them, letting them, I think the phrase was, complete what they have to say.
Yes, exactly. By just watching a thought without getting tangled up in it, you can see it arise, see it hang around for a bit, and then see it naturally dissolve.
And that shows you they aren't so solid.
Precisely. You see their impermanence, their lack of real substance. It's much less effortful than constantly trying to push them away. It's witnessing, not wrestling.
And that mention of attention, referring to the moment just past, that's subtle.
It is. It helps anchor you. Instead of getting lost in future worries or past regrets, it keeps the focus very immediate on the flow of experience right now.
And it's not just for sitting on a cushion, right? This observing the mind thing can help with everyday distractions, too. Like the noise example, noticing you're getting irritated.
And directing attention to the irritation itself rather than the noise. It stops the reaction from snowballing. Very practical.
Okay, so shifting gears slightly. What about when the mind goes offline, or seems to, during sleep? What are the sources saying about the brain then?
Well, they point out that key areas like sensory processing and what they call a neural network training area are largely inactive during normal sleep.
Which could explain why we're generally unconscious and why dreams could be such a jumble, right? No reality check.
Exactly. Dreams are described as kind of collages of daytime patterns, but without that conscious oversight. But here's a fascinating idea.
Go on.
If you cultivate awareness as you're falling asleep, you might actually allow that training area of the brain to, in a sense, work on itself.
So being more aware going into sleep could make the subconscious processing during sleep more productive.
That seems to be the suggestion. More awareness means that training area is more engaged, potentially even while you sleep. It ties into learning, too.
How so?
Novelty, learning new things, that really activates this awareness-related training part of the brain. It's how the brain grows and adapts.
And they mentioned two networks.
Yes. One seems to be for the unconscious stuff, learning habits, sort of automatic problem solving. The other is more for conscious checking, evaluating. And that second one, pretty much offline during dreams.
Which makes sense why we accept bizarre things in dreams. So why do we even need consciousness when we're awake, according to this?
The idea is it's necessary for non-trivial problems. Things that your automatic habits, your autopilot, can't handle.
Like the loud noise example.
Perfect example. You wake up suddenly, consciousness kicks in to figure out, what was that? Is it a threat? You need self-awareness, awareness of your surroundings to make that call.
It highlights how much we run on autopilot otherwise. We're kind of programmed by all the connections formed since birth.
Very much so. Habits, routines, a lot of it runs without conscious thought.
Which leads us nicely into the nature of thoughts and emotions themselves. I love that line. You are beyond thought because you can observe it.
It really starps you, doesn't it? It shifts the identification. You're not the thought, you're the space in which the thought appears.
The omnipresent silence, like the
Wow.
sky, and thoughts are just clouds passing through.
That's a classic analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you can rest in that awareness, that sky, the sources say the mind becomes clearer. Distractions are noticed immediately.
And those chains of negative thinking just stop.
They tend to dissolve automatically because you're not feeding them with identification. You maintain that stillness of timeless awareness, and thoughts are just seen as expressions, not commands or truths.
So meditation isn't about stopping thoughts, but about thoughts self-liberating.
Through recognition, yes. You see the thought arise, you recognize it as a thought, and in that noticing, without grabbing onto it, it naturally fades. You don't get carried away.
And the claim is that this simple observation makes the thought, the ego, samsara, duality, clinging, all of it starts to unravel.
That's the profound potential pointed towards. Yes, by seeing thoughts clearly, their power diminishes. Like watching that river, you're on the bank, not swept away by the current.
Okay, so that brings us to the paths for achieving this. We have those 4 conditions for ultimate liberation. Can you quickly recap those? Drasti.
Right. Drasti is about mental clarity, the cessation of the fruits or consequences of past actions. Prapti is resisting worldly desires, not being pulled around by them.
Okay, Samvid.
Samvid is developing insight, the power to perceive things beyond the ordinary past, future, subtle things. And Prasada is deep serenity mind, senses, energy, all calm and balanced.
They sound like different facets of a truly liberated state.
Interconnected aspects, exactly.
And then there's Mahamudra and Rigpa. These sound really central, particularly in the Tibetan context.
Very much so. Mahamudra is often described as the direct experience of the mind's true nature. Not intellectual understanding, but actually tasting it. And Rigpa is that fundamental awareness itself, primordial, non-dual knowledge, the opposite of being caught in delusion.
And the foundation of Mahamudra is described with 3 qualities.
Yes. Its essence is non-arising, its nature is unobstructed, and its expression is diverse. It all points back to this inherent Buddha nature, this potential for enlightenment within everyone.
The path itself sounds beautiful. The naked, simple mind resting in genuine naturalness.
It emphasizes letting go of complexity, of fabrication, and just resting in the mind's basic state.
And the goal, the throne of non-meditation of Dharmakaya. What does that really mean?
It points to a state beyond striving, where meditation isn't something you do anymore because awareness is the natural continuous state. You're embodying the Dharmakaya, the ultimate nature of reality, effortlessly.
Wow. And the 4 yogas are the steps to get there. One-pointedness,
Yes, one-pointedness, like shamatha, calming the mind, weakening that tendency to cling to thoughts or distractions. Then simplicity.
which is the absence of clinging.
Essentially, yes. Moving beyond needing to grasp onto anything. Then comes unified taste.
That's where shamatha and vipassana merge, calmness and insight together.
Exactly. The separation between the meditator and the object starts to dissolve. Like Gampopa's example, seeing the lack of inherent separation between his hand and the light beam, duality breaks
A
down.
very vivid image. And the last one, non-meditation.
That's the culmination, where even the subtle sense of an observer observing fades. It's called the exhaustion of phenomena. There's nothing left to conceptually grasp or meditate on. The process completes itself.
And there are pitfalls, the don'ts, for each stage.
Right. Don't cling even to focus in one-pointedness. Avoid extremes like nihilism and simplicity. Don't get attached to blissful experiences and unified taste. And non-meditation is beyond conceptual limits altogether.
It also mentions scattered versus concentrated minds, thoughts having less grip when the mind is focused.
Makes sense, doesn't it? A scattered mind is fertile ground for thoughts to take root and run wild. Concentration provides less space for them.
And non-attachment is defined as the complete dissolution of thoughts as they arise. The pearl diver analogy.
Yeah.
Needing the weight.
Yes, the weight of non-attachment allows you to dive deep past the surface agitation and find that inner clarity, the pearl.
And simply directing awareness to awareness itself seems key. It stops us identifying with the thoughts and feelings.
It creates that space again. You see the thought, you see the emotion, but you know you are the awareness seeing it, not the thought or emotion itself. This brings balance.
Even that story about the student and sensual desires, the teacher's advice seems odd at first, but it's really about non-attachment eventually transcending the desire, isn't it?
Exactly. Not suppression, but understanding and non-clinging eventually weaken the temptation's hold. It's a different approach. And importantly, accepting joy without clinging is also part of it. Trying to isolate yourself only breeds negativity.
Okay, let's circle back to the brain structures briefly. The spontaneous front part and the controlling back part, the ego worldview bit.
Yes, that distinction comes up again.
And the core idea, thought blocks awareness. Awareness blocks thought.
They seem to operate in a kind of inverse relationship. Consciousness is for the new, the unknown. Thought deals with the known, the programmed.
Which fits with consciousness kicking in for novel situations.
Right. And does the brain control awareness? Well, the fact it's mostly gone in sleep, unless lucid dreaming wakes you up, suggests it's not just a simple output, it's more complex than that.
Then there was that quick mention of self-suggestion. Best times are before sleep, after waking.
Yes, when the conscious filter is lower, the subconscious is more receptive, and the formula needs to be specific, positive, present tense.
Like programming it for what you want now.
Kind of, yes.
Yeah.
Helping to align the subconscious with conscious intention.
And conscious as a camera.
Yeah.
Recording experience. No recording, no memory.
Like in dreamless sleep, coma, or even just automatic actions we don't remember doing, the idea about meditation recording empty space is interesting.
Because other brain chatter is reduced.
Perhaps. It's recording a state of reduced mental activity, a state of presence or stillness, rather than the usual busyness.
And finally, those huge topics, free will and rebirth. The brain stimulation study definitely makes you wonder about free will.
It certainly challenges our everyday sense of being fully in control.
And the take on rebirth, maybe it's not future lives, but the constant change within this life, moment to moment.
That's a really powerful interpretation offered in the sources. It makes the practice incredibly relevant now. Cultivating these qualities helps navigate the rebirths we experience constantly, avoiding suffering in the next moment, the next situation.
So wrapping this up, it's been quite a journey through these ideas, the illusory self, the power of awareness, the mind-brain connection, the flow of thoughts, and these different paths towards a clarity and maybe even liberation.
It's amazing how these different perspectives, ancient and modern, often seem to point towards similar underlying truths about our experience.
Absolutely. And that leaves us and our listeners with something to chew on. If our brains are sort of wired to create this self-illusion and run on autopilot, how much could consciously, actively cultivating awareness change things?
Really change our fundamental experience of reality, our potential for inner freedom.
Yeah. It's a big question. Which of these ideas or practices resonated most? What might that suggest about your own path? Something to continue reflecting on, definitely. We hope you'll continue your own deep dive.